everyone. I'm Colleen Stanley, and welcome to the Sales Leadership Awakening podcast. And joining me today is my co host, Stephen Rosen. And today we'll be tackling that age old issue of bridging the knowing and doing gap in sales leadership. So, Stephen, I'm going to kick it over to you. I always find myself repeating myself, but we've got another great guest here. Maybe it's the law of attraction at work here. So, Stephen, why don't you introduce our guest?
Colleen, thank you. Great to be with you again. Today, we welcome Rob Ulsh to the Sales Leadership Awakening podcast. Rob, thanks for joining us. And maybe you can share a little bit about yourself, the type of salespeople you lead, a bit more about your company. And if you want to share anything personal, I know there's been a lot of great things going on. Feel free to do so as well. Welcome, Rob.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. The most exciting thing I have going on currently is we have a 3.5-week-old baby boy at home. And
Congratulations.
that's been keeping me very busy on the heels of finishing up my EMBA program at the University of Georgia, Terry College of Business. So lots of good stuff happening personally. On the professional front, lots of exciting things as well. My role is Vice President of Dealer and International Sales for Great Dane, based in Savannah, Georgia. We're one of the largest domestic semi-trailer manufacturers in the country. And also as part of my role, I handle the leadership responsibility for our truck body sales division as well. So I'm excited to be here today and look forward to the conversation.
Great. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, and thanks for taking the time, Rob, with everything you've got going on. So, we have a signature question we always ask, and that signature question is, what was your awakening moment as a leader? And it could have been in your leadership approach, coaching approach, hiring, but does anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, so I would say I've had it recently, if you can call recently 4 years ago. I think COVID, the period of time, has made everything recent. I had a moment in time where, as you can imagine, my job handling dealerships all over the country and internationally, I travel a lot. And I was on the road literally when they called off all flights and sent everybody home because of the COVID-19 virus. And I was on a plane flying home from California and was up front, and there were 6 other people on the entire flight. It was very eerie. And I got to Atlanta, which has always been a bustling airport, and that was empty as well. I got on the flight home to Savannah, which is about a 45-minute flight, and was just thinking about the whole thing. And it was just mind boggling to me as the next 2 years unfolded from a manufacturing standpoint, looking at supply chain issues, how you're communicating with your customers, or on calls like this, on Teams and Zoom and things like that. It really opened my eyes to what the future of everything would be, but mainly my profession, the sales profession. Quite honestly, guys, that was one of the reasons that I decided to go back and chase down the executive MBA. Was I wanted to reconnect and find out what was going on in the academic world, in the networking with my cohort, finding out how other businesses were dealing with this drastic change. And here we are. And that was my awakening moment when we touched base the first time. I watched all this technology and data and digitalization, all that stuff coming to the forefront of every conversation. So I would say that whole 2 year period where I think we were all opened our eyes to what's next. I've heard the term new normal. It's exciting times, but in the moment, you didn't know what was going to happen.
I give you a lot of credit because the popular words were pivot, new normal, and you can say those words, but you can also not pivot. You cannot accept the new normal. And I'm curious with your executive MBA, was there any one or two things that you took away from that? Because you were being very proactive on preparing for the future. And again, kudos to you. But were there anything that came out of that particular program that has now set you up for continued success?
Yeah, I think two things would stick out. One would lead into more of a topic here today. First one is relationships. I think everybody searched for who were your core strategic partners, who could you rely on to not only deliver your input goods that you needed or just be there to buy things from you or to bounce things off. There was a whole lot. We have an entire distribution network that overnight we didn't have customers coming to buy parts at our counters. And so through relationships, I think making calls to people who are experiencing the same things, getting enrolled in this program and meeting a vast array of different people from different walks of life and different companies just helped me bounce things off others and try to work through problems that none of us have ever seen before. And then the second thing I would say that really hit me was the technology piece. I was very fortunate in my time in the program to really go through all these modules with artificial intelligence and AI being that buzzword floating around. All of our professors, to their credit, they led us to AI and made us embrace it and use it and work through it and ask questions about it and things like that. So those were the two big things, Colleen, that I would say really stuck out.
I think those are great. You are a leader in many ways because I know Colleen and myself are both excited to talk a little bit more about AI, but we didn't expect it to come from someone who works at a 124-year-old company. We thought it would be one of the technology leaders that we've met and had discussions with, but most companies just don't survive over 100 years, much less thrive. So I'm not sure what to call you, if it's a unicorn, or certainly I applaud your efforts in terms of understanding what the new trends are, because I have to agree, COVID changed everything and it continues to change many things. So, how are you, given your knowledge, leading that transformation with your organization with the use of AI?
Yeah, so I would say back to the longevity piece for Great Dane, we are approaching 125 years. And in thinking about a company being around that long, you typically think of all the hurdles that you clear from your product standpoint or how you do business standpoint. For me, thinking about sales, there's a lot of transformation over 125 years that's happened in our profession as well, from the printing press to the telephone to all these little things you never even dream of being big changes, even as early as the 90s, embracing internet. And then 2007, 2008, all of a sudden we have these little things here that we've got to embrace as salespeople and email. So here we are today, right, with another piece of technology,
Yeah.
another thing cutting edge that's impacting our profession. And I can say for us, we have just embraced it, Stephen. We've tried to consume as much as a team as we can around the subject. We've tried to not be afraid of it. Everybody sees the headlines and a lot of them are revolve around, hey, AI is going to replace your job and this and that. I don't believe that. I do believe it will impact your career if you don't use it and you don't get familiar with it and you don't evolve with it. But we've just been hands on and just tackling the different things. There's a lot there to unpack.
100%. I'm trying to figure out how to use it in my business. I am sure many sales leaders and salespeople are afraid. So kudos to Great Dane and your leadership to embrace it, but help our listeners understand where you have utilized it. Maybe give some examples of where and how it's impacting your organization right now. I know we're early stages, but maybe some examples so people can actually, we hear the concept AI, but what does it mean in Great Dane?
Yeah, sure. So just some simple things from a salesperson's point of view. Everybody's familiar with Google and what Google brings to you. AI is more of a featured benefit that you can interact with it and actually have it help you take your topic and evolve it. It's not something you have to put a whole lot of inputs in to help it interpret. Just a simple task for a salesperson going on a first call to a new conquest account. You can prompt AI to go in and not only look at the industry, look at the segmentation, look at the customer himself or herself. Look at the things, you can even ask it things like, hey, what are the troubles and what are the pain points that people in this segment of business typically have? And AI will generate a whole lot of information that you can keep pecking at and softening or building on or diving deeper and that sort of thing. One thing I will say with all of that is I'll caution you that AI is not always right. It has an ego to itself. It doesn't want to be wrong, right? So it's going to keep generating output, especially from a financial standpoint. It doesn't have all its equations correct. It's not going to get all your humor, or it might not get your terms or your catchphrases that you use and that sort of thing. So just a word of caution there. But for the most part, it's almost a sounding board. It's the coach that has this massive background of intel and information that can help you formulate, how am I going to knock on this door?
Mhm. Okay.
Let me just dig a little deeper into that. Is this an expectation from the sales team, or is it an optional use when a sales manager is going out with one of the salespeople? Do they ask them if they've done this research? Like, how are you implementing this and how are you leveraging it?
It's an interesting question. Currently, we don't have any requirements or standards around it. It's one of those things in the tool belt. Every salesperson is different. Every salesperson has different working knowledge. I think And I've seen this as more and more leaders and managers themselves get adept over it, the more it kind of trickles down, right? Even managers and leaders sometimes shy away from things they're not familiar with or don't want to look foolish in front of folks with. It takes some time. And I think that's really what's happening with us is it's organic in nature. I do see a time in the future where why wouldn't you do these types of prospecting things up front to just make sure you got those things covered? It's no different than the way people use LinkedIn.
Right. It's become standard procedure, whether it's enforced by the company, but you guys seem to be taking a lead in this area. And I think, wow, how do you accelerate it?
Yeah. And it's funny because it's just like artificial intelligence. It continues to learn at a massive rate. I think 8 times over a short period of time, it regenerates its own knowledge. The same thing's happening with people that are using. Is the more you do it, the more you talk about it, the more you have conversations like this. It's like, hey, try these prompts.
Yeah.
Try asking it this. Tell it to talk to you like you are an MBA student, not a Harvard professor. You can shape your conversations with it any way you want. It'll become your administrative assistant if you do it right.
So, Rob, this is interesting because we're always talking about bridging the knowing and doing gap. So, you led the charge at your company. And so, I'd be curious because I know you mentioned earlier when we talked about why aren't people doing it, there's this fear of change. And then, if you can talk about that, and then also what were one, two, or three steps that you took to get this initiative? Because what impressed me is you were the one leading the charge at the company. This wasn't something you were like, okay, I'll do it if you make me. So maybe talk about this change factor and then how do you get started? We talk about eating the elephant one bite at a time. Well, this is a herd of elephants for most people. So how could we give them those one or two steps?
Let me start where I started and how I got the conversation going, and then I'll move into the change management piece. But for me, honestly, calling from just a personal standpoint, here we are introduced to it in class. It can write papers for you. It can write content. It can do all these things. When you're a classroom setting, being a student, I know it was 30 years ago since I sat in a classroom and was writing papers before, but now I have this tool that can write papers for me. And I'm like, wasn't that plagiarism or isn't that a little bit close to the line? And you have your professors telling you, no, do it, embrace it, get some ideas
Interesting.
from it, draw on it, have it help you. When I started to do that type of stuff with some of my classwork, I thought, geez, I was on the side practicing this. Okay, if I'm going to call on this customer, how big a company are they? What kind of revenue do they have? How do they make decisions? Some of that information's out there to be had. It concerned me because I was like, holy cow, all this stuff's at my fingertips. I literally came in and talked with my boss and said, hey, I don't know where this AI thing is going, but I'm concerned that from a proprietary standpoint, folks that aren't familiar with it or don't know how to use it may be putting something out there that the company may not want out there. That's where the internal conversation started, Colleen, was more for my concern of, hey, this thing's a great tool, but can it harm us or can it do something unintentionally or inadvertently do something that might not be good? So that's what started the conversation internally. And then from there, the more and more and more I was introduced to it, the more I used it. And that sort of thing was when everything changed from, okay, let's let legal and IT and them handle the do's and don't. Let's shift towards, okay, how powerful can we make this tool to help do our job and to sell equipment?
Your
Oh,
internal IT department actually developed this, correct, for your company?
yes, they're currently involved in all that. And again, that's not my expertise or cup of tea. So, God bless those guys. They're really good at what they do. They've just listened to us. They've worked the backside to understand how to keep things safe and do what we need to do. But really, from there, we turn to, okay, we know this is coming. We know we're going to take baby steps. Let's look at the change management piece because it is scary. It can take your job or it can change your job, all that stuff. So we were just very upfront and intentional about the conversations we had. Leadership was already headed down the line of data transformation, digital transformation. This stuff all tucks in behind that. So we have massive OKRs, objectives and key results around all of that as we move forward. So there's goals around it and things like that. So it's really just become part of our day to day. The change piece, not going to say it was simple, but I think it was because it was such an unknown, it helped everybody just say, hey, come on, let's figure this out together. And we did it that way.
You know what strikes me is when you were in your MBA program, you were almost immediately changing how you'd run a sales meeting or a coaching conversation. This is where I think sales managers, I hope they're listening intently to you. So you would sit there and instead of doing your usual maybe pre-call prep, now you bring in AI, just like your professors were the shepherd or the Sherpa for you. So I think managers really have to take a look at how am I one-on-one coaching sessions incorporating AI to get rid of some of the fear to start doing the guiding that your professors so nicely did.
Yep. And an interesting way of doing that, Colleen, too, is, a lot of people don't really like you in what they're doing. They don't like the change of their day to day. So
Or
using
yep.
AI is an interesting tool in a sense that if you look at a process where you're trying to map a process and you're trying to do the things that could take hours or days, AI can do that in 30 seconds if
Yeah.
it's given the right information. Just a takeaway here, anybody can go do this if they're listening and want to try it after the fact, but just go in and ask it to hang a picture on the wall safely. What tools do you need? How long is each step going to take me? And watch how quickly it shows you how to put a picture on the wall, which is something people sit around going, what am I going to do? Where do I put the tape? Just simple things like that. There's no reason you couldn't process map sales
Yeah, and make it
thing.
simple for people to see it. Yeah, so something
Yes.
takes the scariness out if that indeed is how they're looking at it.
Part of what motivates people to do things is my old coach, when I first started, talked about WIFMs, what's in it for me. And I've always referred back to it. So I'm a sales leader and I'm listening to podcast. Are there any specific examples of how the sales leaders on your team are using it and how they're benefiting from using AI in their day to day? If you have one or two examples to share, not from the salesperson's perspective, but from the sales leader's perspective.
Yeah. Just again, keep it simple. Generating emails. You have a topic coming that you might not understand, or you're being asked to weigh in on something you may not have the time for. AI can help get you started. It can help give you outlines. It can help push you into the internet to where you can do more research. That's one of the things that I really embraced about it. Man, you can do phenomenal things just at giving you words back. You can do stuff with photography, with PowerPoint, with charts, with any other visualizations. There's AI tools out there that can almost get specific about anything you would want to bring. So I think I see our leaders doing a lot of that, not just so much the sales letters and emails and 30-second elevator pitches and those types of things. There's so much more from your overall portfolio of how you go about trying to sell something that AI can help you with.
So when we refer to AI, I always think of Chat GTP. But when I go through Instagram, people list 10 of them that you can use. And can you suggest a couple that you or your team is using that are powerful and specifically what they can be used for?
Yeah, sure. Chat GPT for sure. That's the one that's been widely publicized, but you've got similar AI tools like Claude. It talks to you differently. It's very relatable. It's a good tool similar to what ChatGPT can provide for you. Perplexity AI is another great one. Microsoft has come a long way with their Copilot tool. If you're a Microsoft user for your emails and your Excel and your Word and things like that, Copilot can plug into all that stuff and help you right there on the go. And it also has DALL-E, which is an image creator. So if you
Yes.
needed to do business logos or do whatever you need, there's a ton out there. Just because I've geeked out in it in my personal life, I probably have 50 different AI tools bookmarked in one of my folders on my
Wow.
computer that I mess around with all the time. And I'm nowhere near great at it. I just find it very fascinating.
We're all sort of learning and finding ways. Do you share best practices with your team and your sales team on some people we call super users who had successes with AI in terms of their business?
That's a great idea, Stephen. We don't really formally do that today. We do have a lot of conversation informally around it, but I think that's probably a best practice we could hatch here today, that if you do have those folks that are doing a wonderful job with it or have something to pass along, we could do that. We've got a sales meeting coming up in August, and a lot of this will be talked about and bringing some speakers in and things like that around it. We're growing as fast as we can in our boots and doing what we can, but that's all part of the future of our profession. And what we do is, how do you formalize things like that? Because again, some people are coming along at different speeds and will need that help.
So I've heard a lot of the conversation, not just this one, but others, is on that new business development, new client acquisition. I am curious how your team has applied AI tools to customer retention. You've been in leadership a long time. Sometimes we get so focused on opening up new doors, we forget about existing clients. Has there been any one or two things that AI has helped increase that client retention or made it easier?
One of the big things we've done, Colleen, is again back to our internal usage. And what we've developed is our IT department has been able to connect our systems so that the customer experience with dealing with us and the speed of information flow, what might have taken 2 or 3 emails and maybe a couple phone calls to find out where your product is in production and things like that. We've now been able to have AI go search for that information proactively and bring it back to us in a very rapid period of time. From a customer experience standpoint, they love to know that, hey, I've ordered 50 trailers and here's the dates they're coming off. And if they call to say, hey, let me check on that, we can literally just hit a couple buttons and have confirmation that we're in good shape.
Oh my gosh, because we all talk about Amazon. And the fact is, I think I've had friends, we've all said, well, I want to give other companies opportunities, but Amazon makes it so easy. And that is what I'm hearing from you. That easy button in what we call a time famine world, that's huge. So kudos
Yeah.
to you for that.
From a customer facing standpoint, it's great for them. And think about the salesperson's time back.
Yes.
That could be a whole nother hour of prospecting calls or a lunch date or whatever else they may be able to be doing with the time not spent waiting for a return email or phone call from a plant.
Even from a customer impression, being able to respond maybe in real time to a question, where are my 50 trailers, is impressive.
Yeah, not to take the human touch out of there, but look into the future. Maybe that's a thing a customer does on his own. And everybody gets alerted, hey, the question was asked, here's the information that was fed, and off everybody goes.
So, Rob, you mentioned change management several times. Maybe you can share an example. Have you faced resistance? And also how you've helped shift the organization to embrace AI, just from a sales organization perspective. What resistance have you faced and how have you been able to move forward?
I think one of the big one is working in the CRM. We've got AI tools in our CRM now that help guide you through tasks and things that you may want to say, I don't know how to do that. And it's real easy to just hit the assistance button and have the chat bot or the AI engine say, hey, all you have to do is click here, here, and here, and you got the information. So I guess more than resistance, Stephen, I think we've removed objections through the
Okay.
process, but the resistance is there. That stuff like that was an easy excuse before, right?
I remember 25 years ago introducing a CRM system, and some of the older reps would have meltdowns. I had a very simple rule. It's called the 5-minute rule. If you can't figure it out in 5 minutes, call for help.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that is, I think there's certain individuals that love the fact that can walk them through without them having to make a phone call or deal with somebody else to get them through something that they may or may not have knowledge about. Again, if you're open-minded to the possibilities of what I've experienced with this type of technology and what it can provide to you, the sky's the limit. You can certainly buck the trend. You can certainly not embrace it. But I truly believe that if we fast forward even 3 or 4 years, 5 years from now, good, solid salespeople will make this a part of their tool belt.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rob. It's evolving. Maybe we'll have you back in a year and see what changes have happened, because a year is a long time. So, Colleen, if you were to take away one of Rob's insights and say, hey, this is the one that resonates most with me, what would that be?
The entire theme of what I'm hearing from Rob is if you want the change, you've got to model it. And the fact that that was a huge step, Rob, and I'm preaching to the choir, obviously you. The fact that you enrolled in MBA because you knew the world was changing and it would have been so easy to sit back and wait for it. Because I've heard people say, oh, we've got about 4 or 5 years. As the leader, you got to model it before you can expect it.
That's great. So I'm much more practical, but I 100%, Colleen.
That was practical advice.
No, I think it's awesome that anyone would say, hey, you know what? After 30 years of not being in school, I'm going to go back and get a re-education because the world has changed. My walk away is I'm very tactical is, hey, what a great tool for pre-call planning, for new clients, for prospecting, that you can do your research. Because I know sometimes people, when they're doing their prospecting, they could spend 20, 30 minutes researching a client, where if you've got the right prompts, you can probably do it in 3 minutes and make 50% more calls. So I think there's some very simple applications that help make you more efficient so you can be more effective. That's my practical takeaway. I'm sure as we evolve, we're going to find new ways and people who are doing innovative things with AI to help improve sales. But on behalf of myself and Colleen and Rob, thank you. This was another insightful episode of the Sales Leadership Awakening podcast. We hope you've gathered some really cool strategies and are at least thinking about where AI fits in your organization, because it's more than just knowing that AI exists. It's actually using it that makes a difference. Thank you.